Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another exciting Australian Indian Radio's daily Facebook Live update. And hey, it's Friday. Yes, it's Friday. Everyone looking forward to the weekend. Are you? Well, what is it going to be like? And what's the weather going to be like? And with that, let's like to welcome Dilraj.
Good morning, everyone. Weather forecast for the rest of Friday is a maximum of 23 degrees. Brisbane area is mostly sunny. Winds westerly 25 to 35 km per hour, becoming light in the evening, then becoming westerly 15 to 20 km per hour in the late evening. Chances of rain are 0%. Fire danger is high. Sun protection is recommended from now till 2:30 p.m. UV index predicted to reach 6, that is high. Till tomorrow, stay safe. Thank you.
And thank you very much for that weather update. So there's something good to look forward to in the weekend. And as we know that there's been many functions that have been planned virtually, which we will look at as we go along with the news today. But right now, first of all, let's go and have a listen to what our Premier has to say and get an update from her. And if they go on live, we will get them on the show later on as well.
Well, next Wednesday, my friend Jeff Horn fights Tim Tszyu for the Australian and global super welterweight title in Townsville. I know, not exactly the beginning you were expecting. My great-grandfather used to sit on his front steps and listen to the boxing on his radio. I don't have that level of dedication to the sport, but I am a big fan of Jeff Horn. I admire his courage. And if Jeff was here now, I'm sure he would tell you it's not the ability to fight that matters, but the belief in yourself. Muhammad Ali said, it's that ability to reach down and find something within yourself to keep going. Put it another way, it's not how many times you get knocked down that matters, it's how many times you get back up again. And that's where we are all at the moment, dealing with the confronting twin crises, the health crisis and the resulting economic crisis. As a state, as a nation, as a planet. We've been felled by an opponent which is microscopic, and not just in Queensland, but in every state of the nation and every country across our globe. The question all of us are asking is, how do we get back up again? Just as we need a roadmap for our health recovery, we need a strong plan for our economic recovery. Today, I'm presenting our economic recovery plan to bring Queensland's economy back better than it was before the COVID-19 pandemic. I want to see us come out the other side with an economy growing faster than the rest of the nation. COVID has taught us that our economic recovery must be driven by Queensland for Queenslanders. Businesses are changing the way they operate because they have to, because all of our lives have been impacted and changed. That's why we can't just build the economy back to the way it was before. We have to build it back better. Sure, it's very challenging, but it also brings incredible opportunity. Queensland's economic recovery plan has been developed to respond to a set of conditions never before seen in our lifetime. and it's a strong plan that depends on Queenslanders working together and looking out for each other, just as Queenslanders have done, responding to cyclones, to floods, to bushfires, and indeed perhaps more so than ever during this pandemic. Working together is what has made us resilient. It's what has made our disaster management systems world-class. The COVID-19 pandemic has taught us never to let down our guard, and we see that again just today. Overnight, we have been rapidly dealing with 2 new cases of coronavirus affecting South East Queensland. You can never be sure where this disease will rear its head, and this shows we are not out of the woods yet. Queensland's response to the COVID-19 pandemic started when our Chief Health Officer spotted the risk of coronavirus while it was still 7,000 kilometres away. The State Health Emergency Centre was activated weeks before our first case. Fever clinics attached to major hospitals were established before they were needed. Plans were made to free up hospital space before it was needed. Plans were made to create even more hospital space at the showgrounds for the first time since the Spanish flu pandemic of 1919. On January 29, less than a month after the first cases emerged in Wuhan, Queensland declared a public health emergency. Our Disaster Management Committee met and I called for the need for national action. We undertook and continue to undertake detailed scenario testing and continual testing of our systems to ensure we have the rapid contact tracing capability.
And as we know that there has been a bit of a challenge there on the border, and the border closes because of this plan that's been put in place. The Chamber of Commerce, as we heard this morning, that they were opposing all that, and they said, this is more politically driven rather than being, a health issue. But I think when you look at the safety of everyone, I think these measures were well placed, and they were probably put in place at the right time as well. And of course, we can never be very complacent. I can understand the industry point of view and the commercial side of view as well. So the Chamber of Commerce is defending the rights of its members and their livelihood, but of course livelihood versus health. So I mean, if your health is not there, then everything's gone. Well, right now let's go to Victoria, where it all began. So coronavirus Australia, there's flashpoints at the border as the National Cabinet agenda, and Victoria records 179 new cases, 9 deaths. The latest figures for Victoria are out. There has been 179 new coronavirus infections recorded in the last 24 hours. Sadly, 9 people have died. Melbourne's St. Vincent's Hospital has made an urgent call-out for doctors and nurses from interstate and New Zealand to help cope up with the COVID-19 response. In an online advert, the hospital says it has been hard hit and stretched to the limit by the pandemic and needs workers who can commit to at least 6 weeks in Melbourne. The hospital has been linked to a dozen of COVID-19 cases. So Victoria recorded 240 cases on Thursday as Premier Daniel Andrews, whom we will get to listen to in a minute, said it's too soon to give time frame on the easing of the restrictions. Of course, it might be a little bit premature. The state saw 13 additional deaths. The Victorian inquiry into hotel quarantine had stories of confusion and neglect from returned travellers and nurses. New South Wales recorded 5 new cases yesterday. 2 security companies have been investigated after an audit found that the companies had been illegally subcontracting some of their New South Wales hotel quarantine security work. So there has been a lot of breach in that sort of area, and things that probably have not been traditionally Australian-like. Our integrity of workers, companies, and work ethics has always been high. Borders will be a hot topic today, as we know, as I mentioned before, at the National Cabinet meeting, and South Australia's hard border closure with Victoria has come into effect as of today, and New South Wales Deputy Premier John Barilaro is pushing for relaxed restrictions on his state's Victorian border, as it is revealed the closure cost New South Wales $73 million a week. That's a lot of money. There have been about 22.5 million cases of coronavirus worldwide, according to the Johns Hopkins University tally. That's the tally that we follow every day here as well. So the global death toll has passed 789,000. So that's a lot of people. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now let's move on and let's go straight to Melbourne and join Premier Daniel Andrews.
17,683 aggregate confirmed cases of coronavirus in Victoria. That's 240 new cases since our update yesterday. I'm saddened to have to report that there are now 376 Victorians who have passed away as a result of this global pandemic. That's an increase of 13 since our update yesterday. Of course, our thoughts, prayers and best wishes are with each of those 13 families. We wish them well at what will be a very difficult time for them. By way of information, I can confirm that 1 male in their 70s, 6 females in their 80s, 5 females and 1 male in their 90s. That is the composition of those 13 tragedies. 8 of those deaths are linked to outbreaks in aged care settings. There are 622 Victorians in hospital. 43 of those are receiving intensive care, and 28 of those 43 are on a ventilator. A total of 2,028,909 test results have been received from laboratories, which is an increase of 20,279 on tests since yesterday. So that is back to that around 20,000 mark. And again, I'll take this opportunity to thank every Victorian who's coming forward and getting tested. It really is critical for us to have a proper picture of how much virus is out there and to make sure that we're isolating those who are positive away from other people to try and drive that R0 number, so the number of people on average that an infected person in turn infects. That's how we drive numbers down, by having not every person who's got the virus infecting one other, but every second, every third, every fourth.
Not that I'm aware of. At the moment, I'm waiting for the genomic sequencing of the virus that.
This is live, sorry, so we had to cross over straight away.
Those young women who went down to Melbourne. I haven't got that genomic sequencing yet. I expect it in the next week.
So it might take a week before we might feel comfortable with that. With the woman, has she been tested again? Like, how confident are you that this is an actual positive and not a false positive, for example?
I'm very, very confident. I must admit, when I got the first result the other night, I did question it because there were no links. So I asked for a second test to be done immediately, which was done, and it was definitely positive. So I'm absolutely, totally confident this is an actual test. Now, we will get the genomic sequencing, so that'll give us even more information. The health advice is that we must, and I say this every single day, we must minimise movement of people in and out of areas that have got higher numbers of cases. So here in Queensland, you heard, we've got 6 active cases. So that means we need to protect that. And the best way of protecting it is for people to not go to places where there are active cases and bring it back into Queensland. So that's the whole border arrangement. Now, we do have some exemptions for that. We can't be as strong with our domestic borders as we are with our international borders, because we are one country and there is a lot of movement. So that's why we're allowing people who work in the construction industry, the resources and mining and the agricultural industry to continue to move over the border. There are limits, of course, there are requirements, so we need to manage those. But ultimately, in my view, if we were to have an outbreak in a construction site or a fruit picking site, or in the resources sector, we could manage that by closing that area down, and all of those industries know that. So that's why they're putting in place their risk management in their areas. But that's really important we keep that movement going, although it is, of course, a risk, but it's less of a risk. There are other people I'm far more concerned about, which is why I'm being very rigorous about those. I don't want healthcare workers crossing the border, because they're coming from high-risk areas, working in high-risk situations, and then coming into Queensland and going into a high-risk situation, either an aged care facility or a hospital. So we've made decisions there that those have to be managed. Similarly, police. I don't want police crossing the border one side on the other, because they're in high-risk situations. They're managing borders, they're managing hotels, they're managing out in the community. So again, I've got concerns there. And then I don't want people crossing the border who can actually manage their lives where they are. So I don't want them coming across to as tourists for recreational purposes or to go shopping. They can do that on their side of the border. So it's all about risk managing. I'm concerned about the amount of movement out of Sydney into northern New South Wales. That definitely concerns me. It is good to see that New South Wales is looking at their risks in Tweed, because I know that were the virus to get out into the Tweed area, that would be a very big concern for us in Queensland.
Just on that, Qantas has revealed that its second most popular flight is that Sydney to Ballina. How much of a concern is that for you in the movement in New South Wales?
Exactly. That's the reason behind why we've done all this and why I'm keeping such a close eye on what's happening in Tweed, because I'm well aware of that movement. There is no restriction in New South Wales for people to move into northern New South Wales, so it is a big concern.
So how would you describe the current situation in New South Wales and Sydney at the moment?
It's clear that they're getting on top of it. The numbers are coming down, which is really reassuring, but they're still having those cases that they don't know where they came from. So that is a concern, and it means that there is still a risk, and indeed we've seen it here in Queensland with people coming out of Sydney, coming into Queensland. So I am very concerned about people coming out of Sydney, coming into northern New South Wales. That's my advice today, yes.
Dr. Janet Yang, the Chief
Well, my
Health Officer for
advice is
Queensland.
driven by health, and that's the only issue that I consider.
And he also said if we drop premiers who are pursuing an elimination process, the country will go broke. Is Queensland pursuing an elimination?
No, if we were pursuing an elimination process, I wouldn't be recommending that all of these workers cross our border, who definitely are at risk of bringing the virus in. But I believe, because of our great systems in place, we can manage any case in those selected areas very quickly. But if we wanted an elimination strategy, our border would be closed to everyone.
We've been contacted by direct family members of people who work at the detention centre who say that those people who, some of the people who work there, have been told that they're only going to get tested if they've got symptoms or if they work directly with this woman. Can you shed some light on who's getting tested, when are they getting tested? Like, is it a possibility that people just haven't been told that they need to get tested yet, or...?
Every single resident in the centre will be tested. Most of them have already been tested. We're waiting on results. Every single staff member who's worked in there during the period of concern will be tested, and any residents who have left the centre during that period, because there's quite a high turnover in that centre, we're tracking down and we're testing. So we tested one last night who'd been in the centre recently, and that test was negative.
And is it a possibility that some of the staff that work there, for example, they haven't been tested yet, but they will be tested?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of staff, well over 500, who work there, and not all of those, of course, were on duty yesterday or today even. So they'll just methodically go through and organise to test all of those staff.
Right.
Yes.
So, Dr. Young, I just we're talking about the border.
So it's Dr. Janet Yang answering the questions for the media.
Mum who had a baby in Grafton, it was an emergency C-section. The baby was taken to the Gold Coast for treatment. The baby's now stronger, but Queensland Health will only return the baby as far as Tweed, and somehow Mum has to meet the baby there.
That's often what we do. We have an arrangement between the ambulance services in Queensland and New South Wales, so I don't think that's any different to the normal process. But that's a question that we can always check with ambulance. But genuinely, that is usually what happens. We will move someone to the border because New South Wales has got a very, very competent ambulance service, of course they do, and just hand over.
The family, I guess, feels a bit like the baby's just been dumped there.
No, of course not. No. New South Wales has got excellent health services. I mean, we have excellent health services, but New South Wales does as well. I have no concerns there.
You touched on the exemption process the other day. Obviously, had a lot coming across your desk. Is there
Yep.
any update on how that process may be?
Yes, so every time there's a change to the border direction, we have to change the exemption process. So we're just working that through now. So the most recent change was 1 a.m. Thursday morning, so we're just working through the change to the exemption process. But we have gone and clarified all of the medical exemptions.
That is the
So, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to once again go back to that address by Premier Daniel Andrews of Victoria as the press conference with Dr. Janet Yang is happening at the Parliament House right at this point in time. So let's continue with Premier Daniel Andrews and his report.
8 of those deaths are linked to outbreaks in aged care settings. There are 622 Victorians in hospital, 43 of those are receiving intensive care, and 28 of those 43 are on a ventilator. A total of 2,028,909 test results have been received from laboratories, which is an increase of 20,279 on tests since yesterday. So that is back to that around 20,000 mark. And again, I'll take this opportunity to thank every Victorian who's coming forward and getting tested. It really is critical for us to have a proper picture of how much virus is out there and to make sure that we're isolating those who are positive away from other people to try and drive that R0 number, so the number of people on average that an infected person in turn infects. That's how we drive numbers down, by having not every person who's got the virus infecting one other, but every second, every third, every fourth, and so on. That's how we finish up halving and halving again and putting that pressure on those numbers and getting them down to a much, much lower level. Particularly Ballarat, Bendigo, Geelong. But again, this applies right across Victoria. If you've got symptoms, even the mildest symptoms, please come forward as soon as you experience the onset of those symptoms, no matter how mild. Get tested, isolate till you get your results. It's just a massive contribution that you can make at a very, very personal level to the cumulative fight, the fight that we're all in against this wicked enemy. I can confirm that there are 3,784 cases with an unknown source. That's 33 that have been closed out. That coronavirus detective work has closed those cases out since yesterday, so 33 since yesterday. There are 753 healthcare workers who are active cases. There are 1,811 active cases in aged care settings, and the total number of active cases is 4,864. Alan will go to why those numbers have dropped substantially over the last couple of days. There's been a power of work gone on in terms of that exit process, if you like, going back and making sure that people without symptoms and can return to normal, or at least COVID normal. I mentioned those regional cities a moment ago. Let me just give you the split on active cases. These numbers never tally because there's always a few that are still being investigated, but as best we can. 4,864, that's the total active across Victoria. 4,438 of those are in Metro Melbourne or Stage 4 restriction local government areas. There are 295 that are in regional local government areas under Stage 3. There's a handful of interstate residents, and there's about 130 odd that we are still investigating. So
there's the figures coming out of Victoria, as you know, as mentioned, that they have taken control, and the control measures are in place. But even then, I still believe we're still way off, the safety mark. Well, right now let's go overseas, as we're fast running out of time as well. And first up is President Trump, and as his former chief strategist Steve Bannon was arrested and charged with fraud over a fundraising campaign. What he had to say was that is really sad.
I think it's a very sad thing for Mr. Bannon. I think it's surprising, but this was something, as you know, just by reading social media and by reading whatever it is and by speaking to Mike and all of them, I didn't like that project. I thought that was a project that was being done for showboating reasons. I don't know that he was in charge. I didn't know any of the other people either. This is the ultimate fishing expedition. Nobody has anything. We don't do things wrong. But they'll say, let's go in and inspect every deal he's ever done. Let's get papers from 10 years, every paper, every deal he's ever signed. Maybe we can find where some lawyer made a mistake, where they didn't dot an I, where they didn't put a comma down someplace. And then we can do something. This is a disgrace, and this should never, ever be allowed to happen again.
So there you go, coming in very hard and fast on that this should never ever be allowed to happen. Well, some things that should never be allowed to happen is also happening. Well, as we know, over the last couple of weeks and probably months, we have been following the stories of the refugees and the Free the Refugees movement, and we know that a lot of them are under lock in Kangaroo Point. But one of the refugees has been charged with the possession and distribution of child exploitation material. So Queensland Police executed a search warrant, and when you look at all these things that are happening right here at the Kangaroo Point Central Apartments, so Queensland Police executed a search warrant and seized electronic devices belonging to a male detainee at Kangaroo Point Motel in Brisbane on Thursday night. So while there are people out there protesting for their release into the community, and then they are found that they have this kind of material and this kind of things with them. So it does not put forward a very good case, or does not paint a very good picture, in their terms. So that's the Kangaroo Point Points Motel, where the refugee has been charged with the possession and distribution of child exploitation material. So when we talk about the balance, where do we strike the balance? So rules and regulations are there in place. So the rules need to be followed and abided by, but where the rules are made, where the policies are made, people who make the policies, who work on the policies, are called politicians, and sometimes even they get a little bit hot behind the ears, as they say. Let's go to Tasmania's Parliament.
Ms Haddad, whether consciously or unconsciously, is running a weaponised narrative, Madam Speaker. Absolutely. We hear the groans from Labor, which is so compromised on this.
You can't distinguish the two.
And this is an article in the written by Chris
Ms O'Connor, we are trying to run a safe workplace here. I think you are just on the border of being very, very personal, and I personally feel extremely uncomfortable with what you are saying. I don't believe Ms Haddad had any intention of any of those things that you've claimed, and I don't think I think it's a personal attack, and I'm not comfortable with it.
Okay, if I could just on that, Madam Speaker, in Ms Haddad's speech she said I was calling out racism pure and simple. She said that I have a very strong bias against the Chinese. That is a lie, and I'm entitled to defend myself in this place. Madam Speaker, she has accused me of the most grotesque motives, Madam Speaker, which I reject absolutely, and in fact which are an insult to Chinese Australians, Madam Speaker, because when people stand up and speak out against the human rights abuses of the Chinese government, Madam Speaker, and they're accused of racism and xenophobia, it's an attempt to shut that criticism down. Madam Speaker, it is a weaponised narrative. And I watched the broadcast again last night, Madam Speaker, which is why I'm in here now. And I didn't, unfortunately, hear you, Madam Speaker, pull up Ms Haddad for calling me a racist, biased against the Chinese, Madam Speaker.
Because, quite frankly, I didn't find her address as insulting as yours was. I know you are entitled to an opinion, but you're just one opinion out of 25. And I'm afraid you are going very close to being out of order. Anyway, your time is up. Thank you, Dr. Broad.
Well, Madam Speaker, I'll be back in here because I want Ms Haddad to withdraw that accusation and apologise.
Pointing at the Speaker.
Some heated moments there in the Tasmanian Parliament. Well, I mean, our economy is reliant on the migration population, on the migration coming in. So migration and population growth are crucial to getting the economy moving again. So closing our national borders caused an immediate economic shock, but it also meant that for the first time in decades, the economy would be without the constant boost to growth that migration provides. Understanding the significance of population to aid growth will be crucial to getting the economy moving again, particularly in the times of high unemployment. As we know, Australia has always had been a migrant country. From the early days, people have been coming here, making these land homes into the boundless plains that we so have to share. So what is going to happen? Let's take a very quick look at that before we go into the finishing segment for today.
Amazing New Zealand. These are the Isles of Astonishment.
Each year, cities continue to sprawl. As we go to the phones, good afternoon.
Like the tide, the flow of people across the Tasman has never been one way.
As the country threw itself into lockdown, New Zealand's population quietly passed 5 million people.
If you want to see what the Australian economy would look like today, without the consistently high levels of population growth of the last couple of decades, go to New Zealand. While immigration to Australia has consistently boomed, and with it economic growth, New Zealand struggled at times to hold on to its people, as they were lured to Australia by higher wages and more jobs. But then growth took off a few years ago, reversing the people flow, and now...
And I'll just pause there and for the commentary, because when you look at that graph, that people have used New Zealand as a stepping stone. As we know, many people from the even the Asian countries have used that scenario as well, because of the good relation between Australia and New Zealand. So when they find it hard to come to Australia directly, they go to New Zealand first, fulfill those requirements, and then they cross the Tasman.
COVID-19 sees expat Kiwis come home in droves.
We employ a lot of, I'd say, high-tech, high-skilled software developers and hardware developers. And I'd say in the last 10 years or 15 years I've been doing business, getting the top quality staffing was actually a real problem.
Yeah, it is.
Woohoo! At dinner time, what did we get, guys?
Nachos.
Nachos.
We flew in last night from Sydney. And I've got 3 kids and a wife with me, so a family of 5.
From his perch in hotel quarantine in Auckland, Lee Stewart can see a glimpse of his new, old life. He's taken his first job at home in New Zealand since moving to Sydney as a graduate 2 decades ago.
I had 3 days' notice to move from Wellington to Sydney in mid-1997. it was totally incomparable. And you could have more business in one building in George Street than you have in the whole of New Zealand at the time.
Returning Kiwis are being snaffled up by employers like Andrew Radcliffe, who make software for the construction industry.
We've got an amazing pool of talent that have entered the country, and I've actually employed one of them.
All about making the earth work.
We're now seeing, and I think every Aucklander sees this, we're seeing suburbs popping up in the outskirts of Auckland everywhere.
People probably my age, having young families, have the desire to come back to New Zealand.
Back on our side of the Tasman, economist Chris Richardson is watching the slowdown caused by our closed borders.
We have much more people power flowing through our economy than is typical, and that changes the way our economy works. You see it in how our universities are set up around foreign students, how our construction sector, housing construction, but also office construction, retail, the rest of it runs hotter than in the rest of the world.
Modelling from KPMG suggests even if we find a vaccine in the next 12 months, the slump in our population growth means Australia's GDP will still be $45 billion less in 10 years' time as a result of the damage so far. Without a vaccine, the economy will be a staggering $117 billion smaller in 2029-30.
So there you go, those figures to go by, and it's not a very, very good look out there. As we know, growth of any country is dependent upon the GDP, and the GDP then again relies on the population growth and the new people coming in, which boosts a lot of sector, the building industry, the real estate sector, the housing market, and everything is fueled by the influx of the number of people that come in. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now let's take a very quick commercial break, and we'd like to thank GlobeNet Realty for that.
ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी 1989 से लेकर अब तक का विश्वसनीय और माननीय ब्रिस्बेन का रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। उषा चंद्रा, जो कि ग्लोबनेट की डायरेक्टर है, अपने ग्राहकों को ईमानदार और एथिक सर्विसेज देती हैं। अगर आप ब्रिस्बेन की प्रॉपर्टी में पूंजी लगाना चाहते हैं और आप चाहते हैं कि आपकी प्रॉपर्टी को प्रोफेशनली मैनेज किया जाए, तो आप आज ही कांटेक्ट कीजिए उषा चंद्रा को। लैंडलाइन नंबर है 38654466 और मोबाइल नंबर है 0419775416। और आप प्रॉपर्टी की अधिक जानकारी और करंट अपडेट्स के लिए हमारी वेबसाइट पे लॉगिन कर सकते हैं। हमारी वेबसाइट है www.globenetreality.com.au। ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी आपका अपना लोकल रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। हमारा पता है ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी, शॉप नंबर 5, 2281 Sandgate Road, Bundall, Queensland. GlobeNet Realty. Real estate is our world.
And it definitely is the world. Well, right now let's go and take a look at some of the functions and events that are taking place. Don't forget that a lot of these functions and events would be taking place even virtually. The mental health seminars that are taking place, National Mental Health, and of course they have quite a few webinars which I would highly recommend that if you get a chance, please do log on to that. And yesterday we had the multicultural consultation with ITO. All the multicultural leaders throughout Australia got together with that consultation with ITO on many updates that they put out, especially on JobKeeper and mainly around the areas of the new employees' entitlements, and of course moving forward, what would JobKeeper look like and who would be covered and what would that cover be. So we will bring to you the report because they will send us that report and we have been asked to then pass on that information within the community, which we will do. We'll share that in depth and in detail here from this show next week. And of course today is another multicultural consultation which is taking place on the south side. I'd like to see if I can meet as many people there tonight. That's been organized by Graham Parrott, and of course it is by invitation only and by registration. But we will bring to you the details of that as well once that has happened, which is tonight at 6 p.m. So there's quite a lot that's still happening out there within the multicultural field, and we had the police consultation earlier this week as well. Quite a lot of issues that have been discussed there of multicultural nature, which is affecting a lot of people as well. And one of the problems that was highlighted there was, which is again, I'd like to get someone in to talk about that, is an area of concern is, the access that young kids these days have to mobile devices and what they are exposed to. There are so-called messengers for kids, which is supposed to be, safe. But once again, nothing is safe once you are online. You just don't know, who is on the other end, and the hackers are very, very smart, and they get to that. And some of the case studies that were put out by the police is alarming to look at that. So we need to raise awareness on all these kind of issues. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, it's been wonderful having you here on the show. Right now, I'm going to finish off by crossing over to India and getting an update from there.
Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu on Thursday released 2 reports: status of sex ratio at birth in India and elderly population in India, status and support systems. The reports were prepared by the Indian Association of Parliamentarians for Population and Development. Here is a detailed report. Addressing the virtual event at his official residence, the Vice President cautioned that development challenges will become more difficult to resolve as population size increases. In this regard, the Vice President pointed out that India's population is projected to grow to 1.52 billion by 2036. He also welcomed the IAPPD's focus on population and development, saying that we must recognize the connection between the two.
Families must plan their population. It's not the government alone. Everybody should think about this issue. As the population size increases, developmental challenges become more and more. It's not that development has not taken place. Whatever you have, you share it. So you plan the family accordingly. And then move on. The delivery of basic services to reduce poverty is also an important aspect.
Calling for a revival of the joint family system, Venkaiah Naidu said our family system must serve as an example for other countries. The Vice President also expressed distress over reports of neglect of the elderly.
And ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. And as was mentioned that, the essence and the value of the old traditional extended family system cannot be overlooked, and that is a model that we need to reintroduce. And I think, when you look at what's been happening now during this pandemic, and that's been taking place as well, people have been spending a little bit more time together. In the olden days when you came home, it was not only mom and dad and yourself, you had your uncles and aunties and everyone else there in the household, and it was a big family affair. You had to live and learn to live with an extended family. So as was mentioned that it might be a good model to re-look at, and that age-old saying in India is managing the family, from the very, very long time. That message has been put out. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been wonderful having your company, and for whatever's left now, of Friday, enjoy the Friday, and of course, looking forward to, catching up with few of you in the weekend. I know there's few functions that have been planned, but once again, please, 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 unless it is absolutely necessary, stay safe, stay home. If you really, really have to go somewhere, and if you have taken the necessary precautionary measures, please do go out. You often need to, as within Queensland the movement is not restricted, but once again we need to be careful. So until tomorrow, it's goodbye from me. Be good, but more importantly, stay safe.